Sange Drupa So. Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhi Swaha, Tayata, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhi Swaha. Tayata, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhi Swaha. Oh, that's ngabati yana nana chukpa di tanda go tsugirwa kanda tona sindrwe kanda tona mara kangshik denna neba seba kyulti odi ya ta dini jawa chu dik nyema dik chik lapjara jawa cha de ro ta de ta ga je je na zo je ka so de确实有的按这个告诉的确实做完了他sem对他结果的sem对他了他感觉这个他要可以的给这么做啊可以的可这话就上个对我说来当过颜色他说什么安就这个简单什么让都这个简单按可以看见有嘛的当个来当过就什么让嘛对吧这个的牛么这个的给出真的对按让国这个可以这个修给这么差这个多可以这个给这么差这个多我的意思是刚到中了都该配就行这上个叫我娘就了讲的人家没有就这边中央部门解释了意思So just to recap a little, is that verse number 5, and that this states, when you keep their company, your three poisons increase. Your activities of hearing, thinking, and meditating decline, and they make you lose your love and compassion. Give up bad friends. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. And so it is that, when we have that intention to engage in any kind of spiritual practice, that the environment that we are in, the company we keep and the environment we find ourselves in is extremely important. Now, it is important for us because we are beginners setting out on that path. If we were very experienced practitioners, then the environment would become of less importance. And indeed, for those that are really adepts, that environment that they find themselves in is irrelevant. But for us, as beginners setting out on this path, we realize that, that the control or the hold of the mental afflictions over us is extremely strong. And also they are extremely adventitious in the sense that they will seek any opportunity to arise and generate and take control of our mindset. And we're all too aware of this. And this is kind of the kind of mentality of a beginner, and that we are fragile, frail, and that so we need to be able to generate a secure environment for us in order for our kind of sprout of spiritual intention to thrive and to grow. And so this is what this verse is talking about. What because the kind of that's connect the toy in there and so no petro at the that no pass the main carry email Madeva. Mila so the Tongue in it, Pama Pinja in it, the Karimba in there, no more pay to not and toss down in the dead. Down in the dead, Sunguyore. Down in the dead. That is in a Gansal, Sewa Malavachina, Suyima, Sewa Malavacha. And it that is Jamba the station to get much then shake it, and Jared Jenny, and it did talk which had the Magoya Tamsi. What that the said in the Takaja, what I can't do the edge. In a Zawadi, Namia Maluachet. Ratsawadi got Tarin get a Yomare. Tarin do get a Kawaii net was left to much. And a panther who got to join a Katina panther swing by that. What is the chat? What is it? Kaja the two bed no more. Just again, no more de Casamis. Two bed no more data in a no more that de Casa data. What you going to kill the Casa, Shama gets what is the chat? So when we associate with anyone, and that association tends to increase our attachment, aversion, our ignorance, our mental afflictions, then we should really do something about that. And it doesn't, none of this depends on the so-called reputation of the friend or the associate or the acquaintance that we are associating with. Whether they have a good or bad or indifferent reputation is not an issue. It's whether our relationship with them, our connection with them, tends to increase our mental afflictions or not. That is the key issue. And it's down to us to do something about it. Now, in many cases, it's very important that we distance ourselves from such people because we don't have a better way of dealing with it. But at the same time, we must never lose our love for that person. And so it's the behavior that's the issue here, not the person themselves. And we must make that distinction very carefully and very consistently. That the distance is not an issue when it comes to love. That we should always maintain that level of love for them, that level of closeness if possible. And of course, with mindfulness and alertness, these two key mental factors, that when we are in a situation like that, we find that with experience, we have more skillful ways of being able to deal with the situation, and so that we ourselves are not overcome by the mental affliction element of that relationship, and that we can perhaps instill some more noble aspirations and thoughts and behaviors into that relationship. And so there are many ways, levels of dealing with it. But the key element is, and Buddha pointed this out very clearly, that when you have difficulty with a person, that it is the mental affliction that is the enemy, not the person themselves. So we must also always maintain our love and compassion for any individual like that.
Yana and so some come to Tabata Tamde YouTube, some come to jail and purchase you to not the Kurd Chagitona. Yamena so the Jabata Nigela Soba compared to a Dutch Kegitona. What are the data drawing your basket? Drawing your basket. Or drawing your basket, social Kushab Chigimento, Namju Yabutu, but what is drawing your basket? Your mother. Drawing your basket, Ranki Casate, the Casodem. Took some peg, Kian Chigitona. Yana, Tosam Conton, Yamne Jell, Kurchigitona, Yana so the Jamba the Nija Kiel, Kurchida, cut it top, Mersan, Taba the Tamde Kimberly, Jake Jinistona. Jake Jinistona, what are they drawing your basket? Drawing your basket.
And so the verse actually points this out quite clearly. When you keep their company, your three poisons increase, the three poisons of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. When you keep their company, your activities of hearing, thinking, and meditating decline. When you keep their company, you lose your love and compassion. So this is really, these are then labeled as bad friends. Their behaviors are bad, inconducive. And that the main issue is that they create an obstacle to you being able to refine your mental actions, the mental attitudes, and develop, cultivate the noble qualities of mind. And so it's important here. It's kind of like really outlining what is at stake and what the risk is when you associate with such people, that you kind of increase the mental afflictions, you lose the discipline of hearing, thinking, and meditating, and your good qualities of love and compassion also decline. And so here, it's not a question of that person, a bad friend, being labeled such because they don't show you any respect, or they look at you angrily, or that, this is not a bad person. That they are the ones that kind of, in a way, it can be merely distracting you from doing what is better. But also that they, as it is defined in this verse here, that there is the decline, degeneration of so many good qualities because of your association with them, and that therefore they present an obstacle to your spiritual practice.
Today, in Baza, Namjun, 다 야고증나 두고주나 최주에 통계를 배제 땅도 받지. 어다 된대지 제도 이나. 아니 돈이 봐 요만다.
So as I normally point out, here is the exact kind of situation in which you apply the training of looking kind of with equanimity on either of both what is good and what is bad that is arising, and making no distinction, because you are trained to transform everything that's good that arises into a spiritual event and practice, and that everything that bad arises equally you treat as a means of furthering your spiritual training. And therefore, in this context, there are no such thing as bad friends, are there?
뭐다 된대기 디 검시 장 남자 이거 말이 봐. 내가 강에 제대 직 삼로당이 당고지 successful 이거 말이 직제 양 successful 영어 야조 제대 아니 그 마슬 모델 게임 거 봐. 그 누가 체드 줘라. 그 직제 샤 맞아. 다 두고면도 샤 맞아. 그 직제 니제 양스 아 가장 소다 그 로고 매체도 저거 요바 인사. 그 라싱게 그 잡는 참아요. 그 고바 탐에도 배도 그래. 아니 간장스나 아니 소스 섬로 소스 공주와 차트도 아니 신랑이 되게 요 말이다. 아니 그가 초두에 전결 도와다기도 아니 걸 내가게 초두에 전결 배마 지게 초두에 전결 딱 걸 아니 팬다 네가 초두에 전결 도와서 걸 계기 요 말과 계문에도 다가지 계에도 나로 소스 셈 두마도 받는 거 되게 도와.
And so, of course, this all boils down to habit, to being able to create a very definite and stable habit of mind. And that this, of course, is not going to happen at the outset, and that at the very beginning, even though we might have one instance of success in being able to, transform a situation, an unlikely situation, into a Dharma opportunity, that it's not going to be the case all the time at the beginning. And so success is something that has to be earned, and it has to be earned through habituating in each time. Again, bringing yourself back to the cold face of mind training, and really using every situation to try and employ mindfulness and alertness in a situation to make best choices, the wise choices. And it's all about that mind training, and that in being able to move the mind in this way. And to consistently engage in the training of the mind in this way, it can be trained to perfection, like really exponentially increase the power of the mind, so that then all conditions can become conducive conditions for spiritual practice. And so, therefore, you will find yourself in an environment, in a life where there are no obstacles to spiritual practice. And so it's, again, down to the ability to be able to subdue and control the mind, isn't it? And so, of course, yeah, now I remember, normally I would start off with our visualizing of Chen Rezig, of course, in the space in front of us, but today I forgot about that.
Yeah. 이제 삼일단에 야구이 그래. 제일 비슷한 법장전 야구이. 다 뒤에라 라미 진짜 따외라마 아니 가서다 자와 탐지 좀 임발라 나봐. 아니 제레스 안다 차도 전도서 삼탄 카드들 삼을까? 어떻게
But of course, to have Chen Rezig there to perhaps avail of the blessing through the descending nectar light visualization is very, very good. And so let's visualize then in the space in front of us, in reality, our own root guru, one who's the embodiment of all refuge, in aspect, the figure of Chen Rezig, and that that Chen Rezig is there for definite in front of us.
어제 다 제레스 차도 전도 공부하시게나 다 차시번 공부하시게나 다 소속 로라 컨디스 밥쳐 근데 제레스 셋업 어떤지
And whichever aspect of Chen Rezig or Avalokiteshvara that you have a special affinity with, be it the 1,000-arm, 1,000-eyed Chen Rezig, or the 4-armed Chen Rezig, or 2-armed Chen Rezig.
Yeah, okay, what did it? And then and jealousy, and rang the tagoto rang a ginger making the same time, you some such. And jealousy, the Tugala, that Chivo on Jaba, Tuga Honti, Combashe, Tuga Hole, with the part of never turn the single of Dana never, and Ishibata, only that Java Chanta, and Ishiba did the Tamtiba jealousy the Latin, and only on good. And Reba made the cooking, but the jealous to tell Reba made cooking tickets. Or the little commercial.
Amitabha, right?
Yeah.
And so that then we visualized all kind mother sentient beings all around us, and then bringing our focus back to the figure of Avalokiteshvara or Chen Rezig in the space in front. We see that he is marked by Om at the crown, A at the throat, and Hung at the heart. And from that Hung, light rays emanate going out into all pure realms of existence, inviting all the wisdom beings and the empowering deities from those realms. And the wisdom beings, they dissolve into Avalokiteshvara, and the empowering deities confer empowerment. And then from that empowerment, some empowering nectar overflows at the crown, and there then arises Amitabha at the crown of Chen Rezig.
Ordinary course. And around the Tagoto Magasam Tamdega, and there, and Jivo on Jamba, Tuga Hola, what I get some somebody the compassion.
And then ourselves and all other mother sentient beings all around are now also marked by the same Hung at the crown, at the throat, and at the heart.
Or the compassion. And the Casura Takaja, and the Semjala Mibeta, Ninja, and the jealous Mibe, Lama jealous Mibe, and Deva. What the letter compassion, what the
And then we have generate the mind of compassion towards all mother sentient beings, and the mind of faith in the figure of Chen Rezig in the space in front.
The letter Lama jealous Takaja around the Rangatago, some Japan, Yala to maintain the Java Pune. What is it?
And then ourselves and all mother sentient beings make the offerings of the 7-limb practice and the mandala offering to the figure of Chen Rezig.
What the Yala to maintain the Java Puma that they want to produce.
The power of the devotion or the sincerity of our practice of the 7-limb practice and mandala, bliss arises in the mind of Chen Rezig. The bliss combines with voidness, and Chen Rezig abides in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
And then Rangi Chiwatilla, Kaja was called Pema and Nimat and Tawet and Jacobashe. Tawet and Jacobashe, Nianjo, the chance of the young Tower to the support of the commercial. And then got that Lama Cheres, Chantan, the Pandit of Lama with Tagichua, the condition could to the change of a color, and the Tabaka, the Cheres, Tilayana, Ranga Niwachi, two Chechen, and Rangi Chiwanacho. Tabuka to shoot, never also. Tabu was a pet, never to some attempts of Sandia Komamato, which just
and then arising out of a brief contemplation on renunciation, the lotus, the moon, the sun disk, and the moon disk mandala seat on our crown. And then make the invocation verse, reciting it 3 times to invite a replica body of the figure of Chen Rezig to come to our crown and take his seat there. And so at the end of the first recitation, O glorious and precious Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. The replica body starts the journey towards us. At the end of the 2nd recitation, arrives at our crown. At the end of the 3rd recitation, takes a seat there and is established steadfastly on our crown, and we feel that he is there until we attain the state of enlightenment ourselves. And this knowledge of the Chen Weijing on our crown remaining there until we ourselves attain enlightenment brings forth a sense of joy in our minds. And then, in order to purify negativity and accumulate positive merit, we again make the offering of the 7 limb practice and mandala. And then being aware how the figure of Chen Weijing is the perfect embodiment of the aspect of compassion of all Buddhas, and therefore holds all sentient beings without exception in that compassion. So we make a pledge to ourselves, may I be able to practice just in that way, with such a vast mind, to be able to hold without discrimination all other sentient beings with compassion. And for that, with that intention, I'm going to engage in this mind training text practice of the 37 aspects of the practices of the Bodhisattva.
상회기 아니 계획발제 가림 요바이네 아니 시와 쇼치 시와 징글랍도스 아니 뒤제 균준 랑게 토마메버서 디바데 디바데 케바도냐 아니 데네게다 로초메 냐메 데네 제발 봐줘 디바지가 나니 되쳤어 아니 데네 양조선데 제발 데네 뒤제 세부 주네 아니 와타 디나시지 용투에게 아니 바자 케바제 샤수 삼사천 어디에 고마시더라 야고요 어디죠
And then we really invoke the descending nectar light blessing from the figure on our crown by really being determined to really please pacify all of the external, the internal, and the secret obstacles and impediments to my perfectly dedicating to practice. And as a result of that, the 5-colored nectar lights descend from the figure on our crown, with the white light predominant, purifying all the negativities and obscurations that have accumulated since beginning this time in general, and particular, all of the obstacles that are latent in my mind-body system to being able to perfectly accomplish the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva. And then with the golden light then descending, that being predominant, we feel this as a blessing to be able to really engage in and perfect this particular practice.
kata kuchebe tone bomba kete lali is wata de toda samatan ene tene dukte pabjan chen tende ene tik pang tuye ta kaje ene tende ta kegen tende pang tuye ene to da chile teru so je pabjan chen to ne de khaba tu ene tende ki dong be xiang de ma so ye ene ge ta pa che ta de ma wa xiwa che su sa da ene de pang tu ya ku cha su sa da chen wata de ya de pabjan de che tu ne ene ko 특제 어디다 사면 당기 제도에 약고요. 어디죠? 아 대다 또 밖에 소 삼자 제가 있네.
So that this particular kind of the descending nectar light meditation is especially important, and I think that if when we have time, when we're reading a mind training text like this, or indeed any text that involves these kind of mind training practices, to kind of invoke the blessing and the help of figures like Chen Rezik on our crown. And so in the context of, say, each verse that we're doing here, like the verse we have just looked at, when you keep your company, your three poisons increase, your activities of hearing, thinking, and meditating decline, and they make you lose your love and compassion. Give up bad friends. This is the practice of bodhisattva. And suddenly they let their light descend, one's own sort of attitude, to being able to fall under the influence of bad friends and so get distracted so that all these particular obstacles arise and are strengthened. And so that purification has the opposite effect of really pacifying our ability to be distracted and diverted like that, and therefore really strengthening our good qualities, that rather than allowing them to diminish, and changing our whole attitude to bad friends and so on. And so to be able to adopt this sort of visualization, to have that sense of presence of Chen Rezig on the crown, and you're doing this kind of practice together, and each verse then really invoking the power of the enlightened being, descending the white-colored nectar light to purify the unwanted aspects of what's being spoken about, and then the golden light to kind of bestow the blessing to be able to really generate perfectly the opposite in this case.
다 개체시들은 먼저 misunderstanding 지지 말고 노르주요 말에 가스나 먼저 드라잉 바스도 지다 개들을 두고 저러다 또 드라잉 바 속에 소소 난게 너무 도움들해. 그러와 너무 도움지 아니 마두가 봐도 아니 두고 도서 디 드라잉 바에 디 상보리스 라베스 도와 다 소소게 너무 도움들한 게 뽕도 뒤도와 이나 아니 개념바 람도 제도와 이나 드라잉 요 말에 그거 더 상보리 드라잉 요 말에 다 뽕도 뒤마도 봐이나 저 상고대 저 년발에 저 상고대야 소소 녀몽 배주 당도래 코에 규제 동도래 저 년발에 다가자 개치주도 소소 셈도 더 받잖아 셈도 왜게 상해 근데 좋아해 최초에 튕겨라 배주 당도가 이나 아니 저 상고 용다 뭐요 따와데 소소도 삼로 당당라 라래 거 디모도 뭐 쳐봐 개치 뭐래 이나 다지 뭐마 저거 봐도 아니 뭐도 지난 게 지금 그 드라잉 바디가 장르도 되고 그랬어요. 와, 장르도 되고 그랬어. 얘네들 자와라 좀 봐야 misunderstand 좀 약보면 좋아. 어디들.
So just so that there is no misunderstanding with regard to this verse, that when we talk about so-called bad friends, this is something that we give the label to. And it's in fact, the bad friend is created by our own three poisonous minds within. And so this is something that we should be very, very aware of, that the beginning and end of bad friend arises from ourselves. And that here, even with a mind that is undisciplined, that not only will bad friends create difficulties for us, but good friends, so-called good friends, also can become bad friends, because again we allow ourselves to be kind of led because we have no mind discipline. And so here it's very, very important that when we understand the kind of source of good, bad friend, of these discriminating labels, that when we have control over the three poisonous minds, control over our reactions to every situation that we find ourselves in, and then there are no such thing as good and bad friends. That each interaction we have is simply another opportunity to engage in spiritual refinement and to engage in our spiritual practice. And so again, it, as always, comes down to our own mind discipline and say, how much control have we got? And so it's very, very important that we understand that this the very root of all of this discipline is based on how much control we have over our own thinking. And so that when we talk in that sense, we can't talk about when we have that control. There can be no such thing as external or internal obstacles to our practice. Because we have control over how we label those.
전에 녀모 패주가 싸워데 매바 마셔고 봐도 매바 자기 봐서 뒤 매바 소에 채도다 아니 가서 매바 소에 채도 다도 손대고 열어 손대고 열어 다 근데 저 상고스가 가시 때문에 있나 네바 세주치스 네바 마세도데 요데 양거다 소도 요데 디거데 아니 다와 야 패주면 양거다도 패주고 싶 아니 신이 담아 란지 룰레 잡데 신이 담아 란지 룰레 잡 아니 제바스마 게셀 나네 있어 아유자
And so kind of this verse is really saying that behind these lines it's really saying it's really down to us to engage in the practice of disciplining, subduing the mind, and so that in this way we can reduce the influence of the mental afflictions at the outset and then ultimately eradicate them completely. And it's not anybody else that can do this for us. Actually, it's saying that really, yes, you have the power to do this yourselves, but it's also that it's our responsibility alone to be able to do this. So now verse number 6. When you rely on them, your faults come to an end, and your good qualities grow like the waxing moon. Cherish the spiritual teacher even more than your own body. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
아니 지금 되베 대화도 가르쳐 요거서 아니 연대 건도 페마도가 이 연대거든 요거 참 마세 연대가 참 아니 그래서 다 연대가 차지 되게 다 가져 교세베 연대가 차지 왔다 교세베 연대가 차 심마치 단스가 말이야 교세베 연대가 차지 왔다 그와 교 마세 주베 아니 연대가 차지 공원에 건도 옆에 양회 다다 관에 관도 팩 어때 제게 아니 괜찮도나 제가 신이 담았고 됐어 신이 담았어 이제 저 제게 민이여 봤다 라메 민이여 봤다 되게 좀 말해 소소게 아니 경게 참 마세도게 연제게 참 관에 관도 팩도게 다치도나 아니 다 신이 담아 찾아야 됐어 이 소소게 아니 가서도 룰에 개쳐지고 됐어 그래서 이 소소 타바다 탐색점에 주고 여봐 있어 류기다 세디다 저저저다 나 류스타 소소 개쳐부 되게 여러 봐 되게 류야고 다고 맞으러 소소 나차 용 거래 안들 거 제보도 개쳐부 쓰고 와 이내 딜레다 땡기 띠기 주베게다 소소라 규지 증기 여봐 있어 규튼도 여봐 있어 어디다 소소가 류들에 아니 개쳐부 쓰고 됐어 개쳐 쓰고 됐어 다디 주베도 다 치다 또 라리게 개치도 랑게 삼로 땅쳐들 또 랑게 삼로 땅쳐들 또 랑게 아니 저 가서다 포지티브 톤에 삼로 땅 지금가 천개라 배주 땅도 봐이나 아니 너에게는 제 봐이네 아니 최주에 천개라 용어 여러 봤다 그 앞에는 서바 공발라 답에는 서발라 가자지 가서 됐다 너들 미세 너밖에가 아니 미세베게 다 지금 남편 너밖에가 저러 소유도가 되게 서바지 때 또나 들어 서바지 편요 싸움이 비자와서 편요인데 가는 때는 너밖에가 때는 용되고 여반다 너밖에가인데 랑게 세베게 규착이 와 보다 싸움이 당신 봐이나 아니 지가 너밖에 봐도 초주에 천개 잡아 와 서바지 다 최주배 가도 쇠발을 하가지 매와 인자 아니 거기 내가 얘기한테 아니 쇠배 교창 와 그러다 쇠바스는 딜라 때문에 연구에서 뒤면은 이 연구요 말이야 아니 이 영화는 딜라 때 거기 요즘 엔지 교차죠 아니 교차도 이 객차가 요 말이야 아니 저 집에 따지 못 찾고 와 어떤 거 소리 소소 삼을 땅살을 날려도 와 삼을 땅다 간자 저 대화다 되게 중요하다 아니 놈은 근데 깨마게 아니 psychological 조당의 약고 심어이나 이 조당의 약고 심어이나 어느 되게 건가 삼을 땅다 지금 전에 그 되게 다 타도 되게 유착을 요인사 아니고 개체부터 다 자체부터 다 고야 고자 또 좀 봐. 어디 수고야.
So, when you rely on them, your faults come to an end and your good qualities grow like a waxing moon. Cherish the spiritual teacher even more than your body. So here, who is this spiritual teacher that's being referred to? Remember that this person does not have to be a high lama with some big reputation who is well known or have some title, but actually it's the one that you have such a connection with, that they really have this very positive influence on your mind, and such that specifically your faults come to an end. Specifically, that your good qualities grow like a waxing moon. So it's a case of here is able to really inspire that that reducing of negative qualities so that it brings out good qualities. So this is what's been referred to in the image here, that they can really expand and increase and flourish. And so this is what the spiritual teacher is. This is what the precious spiritual teacher, this is the one that you should really cherish even greater than your own body. And so it's kind of saying, not talking about, the body that is, prone to sickness or disease, but this is even the body that you're going to take all the way to enlightenment. And so they're even more precious than this. And so here, again, we see that so much of this kind of practice, again, is about really dealing with our own mental indiscipline and gaining a sense of mental discipline so that we have control over our thinking. And really, the root is always back to how we think. What are we feeding our mind with? And so here, it's again understanding that to be constantly trying to cultivate a positive attitude so that our qualities kind of continue continuously, and that our nothing becomes an obstacle to our spiritual practice. So, for example, in the kind of practice of patience, we can, really understand the psychology of being able to enhance our patience. We can see how necessary it is to have that kind of a component of somebody who harms, therefore, because they are the ones who give us the training and testing ground as to how well we are cultivating patience. Without them, we have no means by which to really expand and increase and strengthen our patience. And so that in that understanding the psychology behind this, we can see that when we are able to establish this kind of thinking right in relation to, at the moment when somebody is engaging in harm towards us, then that person loses that label of harmer. And they become actually somebody who is assisting and benefiting us. They become a teacher of our patients. And so this is the important way of which transformation of our whole mental attitude towards all of what's happening to us. And this is just a specific example, so that there can be to reach a point where there is no obstacle to our spiritual practice, because we are capable of being able to really commandeer every incident, every event to actually increase our spiritual training. And so this is very, very important. And therefore, people like the so-called enemy or the harmer who is that one who irritates or who harms is no longer labeled as such as in a negative way, but rather they become somebody who is very precious and key actually to our cultivating such a wonderful quality like patience. Because this is the way in which we can establish an ultimate happiness. So it's a question of making the unmistaken choices. You know, when we're faced with somebody who harms, you know, if we are harmed by that, it shows a lack of patience really on our side. If we have habituated to patience, then not only is that person not only able to engage in harm towards us, but rather we see it as a beneficial situation, as something that is really like enhancing our patience practice. So that the logic there is ultimately whether something is beneficial or harmful, it comes down to us. It depends on our attitude towards it, isn't it? And so, of course, to make such a statement, it makes sense for those who have the aspiration to attain the state of liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment, for those who accept the law of cause and effect. But for those who live within the one life theory, who accept none of this, then, of course, this kind of statement might seem very extreme and find it very difficult to kind of like to be able to kind of do that, you know. So and so yes, that therefore for us it's a case of knowing what is the best response in order to hope for the kind of most long-term ultimate happiness result for ourselves.
Yeah, because 먼저 meaningful life 제 successful life 말아봐. 나란서 meaningful life 제 타바다 탐색점에 유튜브 두고도 뭐도 될 meaningful life 제 열어봐. 다 뒤도는 시험에 있는 수요. 다양 제대 다요 말아봐.
So of course here we're talking about a meaningful life as opposed to a successful life in the kind of mundane terms. A meaningful life is determined by the degree to which we have establish the causes that lead to liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment.
어다 지원에 시험에는 어다 수박 고발에 팽쳐지 뭐도 어디 있게 시험나 아니 거기 좀 보자. 그 제대 다 오케다 정도.
Yeah. So again, we're saying yes. In that context, yeah, such talk about the development of patience makes perfect sense. But if one is kind of just talking about a successful life within the one life theory, then such talk of patience like this might seem a bit extreme.
then 가서 나한테 가서 아메리카 내신 가서 맨날 나한테 gun right.
Yes, and so yeah, it might be very hard for the NRA, particularly in America, the National Riflemen's Association, to kind of accept it because they have such a strong adherence to the right to carry arms, to bear arms.
What did it? 다 이네 세트모도 캐말링이 이네 서바 고마이나 세미 동네 매바도 자리 잡아 넣어 주고 그래. 서바 뭐가 이나 아니 니 집어 그거 말이 가는 서바 고마이나 쌤게 강에 숙초와인데 뜻이 뭐고 그 노예 주고와 노예 주대시.
But we can see also that there's a very definite, more immediate benefits to the development of the patients in the way that we are defining it. That without that patience, you have a great deal of difficulties on a kind of a constant basis. But with patients, you have a much better quality of life. You'll be able to sleep much better and so on. And so they're kind of like practical benefits as well in this life.
다다데 시간 다다딜라 신이 담바 랑데 룰레가 아니 가서 제바스 뭐 게살라 다 신이 담바서 지다 신이스데 라라 아니 람드 지긴들와 타바다 탐지 잡아 주주 람드 지긴들와 신이 담바스 어들 다른 걸로 이제 아니 제바스 진짜 제바데 아니 게살라데 됐고 어다게 다 신이 담바딜라야 아니 군도베 신이 다 된다베 신이 좀다 라라 아니 라다 유타데베 가 사지게 안 디디레 스코 마 지금 제시 잠 남들 제치 용거로 와 내가 군도베 된다바데 랑이 냠돌라니 아니 거자 다까지 제 가서데 미야바세 투에다 아이연데 양면 다다 패투에기 랑이 냠lên 제도 아니 영기 신이데 그러와 시 신이데 랑이 가바존데 레비 투고에마 하고야 말때 영기 신이데 소소 가바존데 레 투고와 신이 담배 제수 송 쓰는데 지단고에 시 신이데 또 저한테 남기 신이 소소 냠lên 아니 소소 루 가발레네 샘 가발레네 냠돌레 되기와 사람들 보다 레기와 사람들 제수 송스도 랑게 또 거사데 랑게 냠lên 사람들 보다 제수 송도 좋아 어디데 아니 디 개처 랑게 소리 디 개처 쓰고레스 신이들 군도베 신이다 된다베 신이니샤 어디데
And so in that line where it says, cherish the spiritual teacher even more than your own body. And I'd say here the kind of like refers to the term the kind of pure spiritual teacher in a way. And it's saying here that conventionally speaking, we speak of the teacher as the one who shows us the way, who shows us the path, and that and in this context there's both the conventional and the ultimate spiritual teacher. And so the conventional is just that sort, the one who gives us the explanation of the text and who disseminates the teachings and so on. Whereas the ultimate teacher is our own practice. And this we must never lose sight of, because it's ultimately, it comes down to us, to the degree to which we will be able to bring an end to these faults and be able to increase good qualities like the waxing moon, as it says here. Because it's what we have on our own mind that determines, our kind of sojourn within cyclic existence and ultimately beyond that, from life to life to life. So the body and speech and so on are always going to be, subservient to how our mind works and what our mind is determined and deciding on. And so we mustn't lose sight that the ultimate teacher for us is our own mind training and the degree to which we gain kind of a transformation of our mental attitudes.
어디다? 먼저 보는저는 교회 신이가 사람들 제수 송아쇼 스몰럼 저거 여러 네, 다 군도베 교회 신이 저저 제수 더다베 교회 신이 소설 낙발을 두와.
So again, so I said again when we make these aspirational prayers for please, oh Guru, please care for me from life to life and so on, look after me from life to life to life. And so this is referring to the conventional teachers, of course, but when the ultimate spiritual teacher is that's in our own hands. That's our own business, and that's what's happening within, as Ghana says, within here in the mind.
네, 가서네, 군조배 교회 시키네, 나도 몰랐는데 저 가봐 이네 냠도 레트고 밑에 따져와. 돈다베 계획신에 소소랑게 냠내데 가바이네 레트고와 다디 타고야 보자도 몰람 자에 계셔 버리다 예 몰람 자가라 사가 아니 라레 가이 그와 아니 데코도 계셔 못 찾는다 어디 모두 못 쳐봤지 못 쳐봤지 정모도 계획신에서 다른 뭐지 라한다 유타데 봐지 샷 그래서 라한다 저와 유게제 도와 대도와 그와 또 용부도 와 따지바로 앞에 나가서 산지에 쓰는데 최대 지도 규잡제 용거를 때 마마도 제잡 들어와 랑군에 잡근데 심지어 담자 담바 뚝뚝근데 가서데 다가자 랑기 제잡 산제 구조 들어와 이 두배 채도 모두 산제를 잡고 들고 열어봐 안에 제잡이 긴데 구조지 랑 가서데 돈이 것으로 또 배셔라 줄라 때마다 랑 제잡이 긴데 구조 차기로 와 랑주게 돈이 것으로 또 셋업지 최군조 차기로 와 이 제도 아니 규격의 산재 군자다 규격의 최군자다 규격의 긴도 군자는 모두 잡수 적을 와. 그럼 모두 잡수 적어 좀더 또한테 랑기 제작 파도 랑규를 계획 제도로 와. 그래서
Good.
뭐냐.
And so that, this is why, like, to be too over-reliant on gaining some sort of magical result through our aspirational prayers when we pray to be cared for, to be looked after by the spiritual teacher from life to life, is it's good, but it can be to understand that this is something that is has no guarantee about it, that we may find ourselves distant from such a teacher. On the other hand, when we talk about the ultimate spiritual teacher within, that we are never, ever without that potential spiritual teacher within. And so we should always seem to say that the prayers, the aspirational prayers, as important as they are never as important as our own practice. And this is something that we should make an unmistaken choice about. We should be very clear about this, that it's about our own self-transformation that's carrying on, going on within. And that this is the one that we have to ultimately rely on. And that, so it's very, very important to recognize this. And again, it also, is something that is very helpful when we have our own spiritual teacher, but who is distant and far away physically. But we also can understand that we have all we need within to be able to work on our own mental attitudes and to develop our spiritual practice, because we are never kind of distant from our own spiritual our own mindset. And this is what's referred to, for example, when we go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, that in the kind of conventional sense, that's called the causal of refuge, of seeing the Buddha as the one who shows us the path, the Dharma as the actual refuge, and then the Sangha as the ones who exemplify that path and give us a good guidance on that path. But the resultant refuge is what we're aiming for, so that we are going to refuge in the causal sense in order to actualize the resultant refuge. And that means that we become, we develop the actual causal, the actual refuge of the real Dharma refuge in the resultant sense by generating the wisdom, realizing emptiness on our own mind stream, and thereby also becoming the resultant Sangha refuge in the sense of becoming an Arya being at that point as well. And that, and then ultimately to cultivate that more and more and more, we eventually end up as the resultant Buddha refuge as well when we perfect all those qualities. And so this is in the same context here, that we have in going for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, in that causal sense, implicitly, we are dedicating ourselves to actualizing that refuge into its resultant sense in this way as well.
다 되는 이마이자 무슨 문제지 라디오를 기회 쳐도 지금 여기서 왔다 제 맞아 다 되게 가서 되게 신이 담바데 아니 제와서 신이 담배 수에 아니 냠들 레베게 아니 지가서 냠내 되게 아니 제와서 라고 소리 개쳐서 제와서 그래서 수고를 받던 다 되는 거야 전다 되는 거야 어디
And so ultimately that meaning is that we are responsible for our own mental mind stream. And that the purpose or the part played by the conventional teacher is to show us the teachings, and for us then to examine what has been spoken by that spiritual teacher, and that having analyzed it, put it into practice in order to affect the transformation of our mind stream. So this is the relationship that we're speaking about.
다 라냐 코베 조라 지바이 지된 하유 수시 잡은요 대치 간라 잡 대치 간라 잡나 밀루게 군조 잡도 제셀라리 있죠.
And so verse number 7 states, bound himself in the jail of psychic existence, what worldly god can give you protection? Therefore, when you seek refuge, take refuge in the three jewels, which will not betray you. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
다 가자제 사제 최다 진도는 타바도바 남지 잡수고요 봐. 다 타바다 탐제 잡아 변도 얘기 지바 이나 아니 잡 밀루와 고고요 봐. 다 밀루와 타바다 탐제 잡아 두개 반에 떠발라 잡 떠바 보서 최디 잡 뭐지 진도도 잡 주면 다 좋았지. 다 가자 저게 내바지 아니 내딜에 타와라 아니 내딜에 가서다 타에 내배 잡치고 쉬우지 내배 잡자고 지금 아니 지금 암지 답에 첼롱하다 매 첼롱하다 아니 내요 첼롱하지면은 타르마도 이게 나자 줘봐 이나 아니 된대게 나자디 펜 도근게 차상하고 그게 암지 개바지 고그로 와 아니 디 암지 개바디게 내서도 못 쳐왔나시 아니 나자들 펜 토에게 매 체대스 고로 와 아니 디 매다 디가 다 유르 못지게 땐도 제고 요자 아니 디라 아니 배 첼로에게 나스 지고로 왔다 진당 실제는 산제 최 긴드 숨데다 저게 암지다 매다 아니 가서 내요 내실제는 왔다 되대지 딱 가지 왔다 진당 실수고요 딱 가지 저 타바도 탐색점도 되게 제나 다 아니 되대스된 거라면도 아니 지대게 하 되대 가지 저게 코아바이 되겠지 아니 컨트롤 잡도 줘대봐 이나 아니 컨트롤 딜랍데 된두고 마데스 숨고요 와 숨고요다 자다 코 소도 코에 쪼라 친데바 지게 아니 그 지단 하이 수시 잡은 다 좀데데 이마 인다 안 타바다 탐데 잡아 두고 전화 가한테 갈라 잡고 밀루와 고그래 밀루와테 아니 군조 좀 군조 잡고 계속 왔다 군조 좀데 아니 가서다 데 아니 밀루와 차다 들라 딱 계속 다니 쳐보 데데 돈데 지게 계속 다니 쳐보 칠 왔다 데데 지금 나오는 거 레스틱 계속 안에 레스트 있어 보트래
So here it's really outlining the what we should go for refuge in, and that for those of us who are determined to attain the state of liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment, it has to be a refuge that can lead to those states, that can obviously lead to those states. And that therefore it's talking about in the verse a refuge that will not betray us, that is an unmistaken refuge. And so here it's referred to as the triple gem, the rare and supreme Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And that here, the image of us as the ones who are sick with a particular disease, the objects of refuge are kind of the doctor, the Buddha, the teacher, the medicine as the Dharma, and then the Sangha as the nursing staff, and so on. all of which kind of must be qualified in order to be able to lead one away from the great disease of cyclic existence and to effect the recovery, a complete recovery into liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment. And so it's pointing out that if you are going to trust in a refuge, in a doctor, medicine, and so on, in that sense, it has to be qualified enough to be able to lead to the result you want. And that if you are talking about relying on those who are still within cyclic existence, who are in fact diseased themselves, as it were, then that is a very unstable refuge, and it's a refuge that cannot possibly lead to complete recovery that you so desire. So it's saying, bound himself in the jail of cyclic existence, what worldly God can give you protection? And so it's saying here, make that unmistaken choice in determining the refuge that will not betray you. And that has to be the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
어떻게 다가 지다 대바스미 개쳐버려 대바대야 아니 좀 제시에 대바 내주 차상화자 하고에 돈에 아니 대바 개리 개쳐버리 말와 개쳐버리 말 어떻게 쳐.
And so you can see here that that faith is, of course, a very important component in going for refuge. But one can easily see that this faith itself has to be based on reasoning, on a sound logic, and that logic can only be sound when one is aware of the full kind of story. The whole picture really should be there for us, and in that way we can make an unmistaken and skillful choice.
그렇죠. 얘네야 아니 미 감도 몇번 나서봐래. 미 감도 몇번 나서봐 인바 인도 아니 미 강가라 지금 미 강가라 아니我这说的大概这个저와 미 강가라 아니这个举了他提了叫说的大概这군조 섬래 셈배 아니叫有말을 세 두고 말이야. 그래. 얘네야 다 타바다 탐대점 저게 지마 이나 타바다 탐대점 저게 지마는 어디 잡는데 지마 탑요 말이었어. 타바다 탐대점 봤어도 아니 감솜제 내주 감솜제 코아이 막 뭐지네 안 뒤에 따와 단지 머리가 이봐 이니 뭐 담에 또베 셔럽 검네 아니 사주 람가 링그 산제 고마 토베 직다 된대게 내주 차상화 하고 봤다 아니 대다 됨 하다만 탑모도 삼삼가 다 된대게 내주 차상화 신게 지게 어디 잡건데 세고 슬라바이나 아니 땡글 게 안잡 멜로아테 잡던 법 멜로아트 거래 아니 최 딕문에 잡고 최 군조도 잡고 됐대 산제도 잡던 법을 최도 잡고 돼 인도도 잡고 다도래 최대 가려서는 어다 감성 코아디 가리 코고서 단지 머리배 코고여서 뒤에 뭐 담에 도배 싫어 안티 무슨 도배 로 다가라 이 귤에 남게 봐다 아니 단지 머리배 오늘 내게 마사야 가도 여바 인사 이 잡고 찾고 와 아니 잡고 다도서도 다 미페 따사 들어와 안 디글에 데베 가사 들어와 오다 미페 따사데 라를 지금 최주베 지금 천개다 미페 동계다 찾고 와 아니 진짜 구조 데데 돈이 도베 세 돈이 무슨 도베 세라 귤에 데베 가사 오다 다지 가사 다지 감성보다 코아이 막 뭐시 아니 되네 마다나 탑민도 썼다 다 되네게 들다 다 잡미로 세고도 되네게 잡대 다 직등을 하지라 세나 아니 편도 제도 말이 좀 여러
And so here, of course, it's obvious that human beings have a varied dispositions and varied personalities, and therefore to kind of insist that all beings have to take refuge in the triple gem in order to attain liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment is unrealistic. That some will not have these aspirations, therefore will choose different objects of refuge. That's fair enough. But for anyone who has a genuine, sincere aspiration to attain liberation or to attain the omniscient state of enlightenment. Then going for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha is indispensable. And that here, this must be kind of made clear, and that in that context, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha will be a refuge that will not betray, and that this has to be understood, because in that sense, that here we're talking about the actual refuge from the reality of all the three realms of existence, in whatever state of those three realms one finds oneself in. One is always subject to that pervasive suffering determined by the ignorance of grasping at a self-entity, and that that which kind of perpetuates the existence. And so one is in going for refuge, seeking a means out of that reality, beyond psychic existence, to the state of liberation, ultimately to the state of omniscient enlightenment. And so that means that we need to seek a refuge that is able to provide the path to actualize those states, that doesn't fall short in any way. And so here then we're looking for the path that is able to both outline the key root cause of psychic existence, this ignorance of grasping at a self-entity, and then the wisdom that is able to upturn that or eradicate that particular ignorance, and so start, really lead us on the path out of the psychic existence. And that is then determined by the refuge in the Buddha as the one who shows us the path, the Dharma is the actual refuge, and the Sangha, who are the kind of the exemplifiers of the practitioner on the path. And so, as we pointed out then, that that the actual refuge is the resultant refuge, is that our realization of true paths and true cessations on our own mind stream, and that then the true Sanghas, the Arya Sangha beings, then ultimately to gain that resultant Buddha refuge of attaining enlightenment for ourselves. So that the goals that we set and that we have aspiration to attain must fit within the refuge that we take in order to lead to those goals. And so therefore pointing out that any worldly god who is still stuck in psychic existence and who is still subject to the negativities, particularly the afflictive emotions of the ignorance of grasping at a self-entity, is not qualified in any sense to lead away from, to liberate us from that. In other words, to attain liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment. And so it's simply a question of being able to make the right choice for the particular goal that we have set for ourselves. And so yes, and so especially for when we look at the first turning of the wheel, the first teaching of the Buddha, of the four Arya truths, it's clearly outlined there. And whether we're talking about the source of suffering, the cause of that, the path of cessation, and the path of the truth of the path, and so on, it's clearly pointing out that in order to really fulfill the four truths and to kind of like really perfect the path, then we need to have a commensurate kind of a quality of refuge to go for it. And therefore, the Buddha is the one who shows us the path, the Dharma is the actual refuge, and the Sangha as the ones who accompany us or exemplify the path itself. And so this is the appropriate refuge for those who have that, who accept the four area truths and who have the aspiration to attain liberation and the ambition state of life. For others who don't accept this teaching or who have a different aspiration, of course, it's a different story altogether.
我就想这个，我他这个，因为呀，我是也把都没看到，没把那说话有话的，也把都看了过的，俺这来的估计下也，是吧？看到就不错呢，俺很多都跟那这个，对不对？有个出路刚刚给，拉着的，想把的人家送过多，他讲这，菜地嘞，俺他叫我起码是明拉不马拉不，明大那马大那。菜地嘞，先把这给吃完自己给吃。菜地嘞，本来还别人给吃不对，是吧？他这看不嘛这边给看不嘛说了，他个这个对外看，俺还有人说这个没有真正的，他明还别打给那，搞打给那，我他今天去了，菜地嘞，给吃完了打什么的，第一次的，俺去这做嘢，说吧方面，俺讲把的人家方面，但蒙古去上边那边别蒙古多。忙不多，我大概在这个我的那个，他这个都这个原来修多，是吧？他的那个看到你看到特别多呢，上边给这个辣椒芒果就越这个吃，也他这个给我起码名大呢嘛大呢，这地嘞先把这给敲这个就他就说给我起码别再看那个都上不着的，然后嘛讲呢，然后来给个他，然后这边呢还并来给个他送的。刚才就给我起码就送不多，民间大约那嘛，这里给我起码就送不一百多少。刚才看那边呢，我上边拉着蒙古大地，当然，这规划的，这个的，这个绝对给什么钱？这把钱是个这多少年做了个的，国家当这把是个这块，那是今天要我钱钱，我得想。
So in this context as well as to what we go for refuge to and what we go for refuge for is in the context that we must definitely understand that we must not lose respect for anybody who differs from us in that context, in any other spiritual tradition or other kind of non-belief systems as well. And that this is simply because human beings are infinite in their different dispositions and personalities and what they have and haven't affinity towards. And so it's something that therefore we understand that in all the other spiritual traditions even, we can see that there are very vast teachings emphasizing the development of love and compassion, and that in short, that in many senses, even in the major traditions, there is this emphasis on the importance of a future kind of existence over this life. And so they may call it, heaven or something like that, or in some sort of a higher state of existence. And so this is sort of like, in one way or another, accepting a future life, even though they don't label it as such. But in order to attain that goal, in other spiritual traditions, there is a strong emphasis on maintaining good ethics, on developing of patience, of love, of compassion, and all the same kind of noble qualities that we hear about. And so, and the advice, relevant to those people of different dispositions is found in different spiritual traditions. And that, that if you are bad, therefore you're going to end up in hell. If you're good, you will end up in heaven, or if it's equivalent. So there is this sort of a sense that, there is a hope or the aspiration for a better future life in these traditions. And therefore, our attitude has to be one of respect and appreciation for anybody who's trying to further those noble qualities as we outlined before. But having faith in what they're doing it's a different question that may interfere with the faith that we're trying to establish towards the development of liberation, etc.
근데 제가 라브리 말로 기부 숨소데 기부스게 누가 유건지가 쓰고 열어 기부스도 누가 유다 기부 숨스도 누가 유건 숨쓰고 열어다 기부 중고 기부 등 기부 전부 숨샤기도 와 얘네 세대 개체부 쓰게라 기부 민다고 요 말이 지나도 가사들와 얘네 야 기부 민다고 요 말이 누가 쓰고 요 말이 누가 쓰게 돼 누가 쓰고 다 되네 이 말이서 둘다 이거 줄로 건강하게 기부 중원이 캘린 거 소리도 안. 대체만 먼저 고마 적고도. 해변 먼저 고마 샤워 지도와. 먼저 고마 적고도. 다가 기부 중원하나 추대도. 최집에 될 도도. 세대 개체보다 기부 중원 될 맞잖아. 최집에 될 수고요 말. 답변아 남는 게 세다 잡아 있나? 이제 기부 중원 될 추대고요. 최집에 될 더 사리. 도도 아니야. 도도가. 내가 그거도 저기 강가라 심에도는 아니 다나 자야. 제수 이란 지에 알 함정도 산제다 잔주 서바스게 주저교 탑을 켜봐네 탑을 켜봐 인도 아니 탑 나도 거는 주저라 편도 되죠 아 릭실라 페나 카지고 돈에 편도 되죠 가젤라 이슈고 돈에 편도 되죠 가젤라 힌두다 되는 돈에 가젤라 남바고 돈에 가젤라 자주 우리 다 되는 편도 되죠 가젤라 전신 돈에 편도 되죠 다 편도 되라 타요만 지어봐 인사 이거 쪽으로 와 이나 되네 예배 좀 제가 강가를 대바 제스고 요 말이. 야 대바에서 수수 미유다 좀 마샤오로.
So, for example, in the Lam Rim or the Graduated Path series of teachings, we hear about the three capacities of being. And so being in that sense is that the very word is one who is endowed with potential, one who has some sense of potential. And as you know from the Graduated Path teachings, the being of lower capacity already has a sense of working towards a better future rebirth. And so this is where it begins. And so that therefore, for somebody who is just obsessed with just this life, they don't even count as being in that context. They don't have potential because they're just completely obsessed with just the benefits or so on, or overcoming the difficulties of this life alone, and no aspirations at all thereafter. So we also can see, say, within the Christian or the Islamic traditions or in the Hindu traditions as well, they are already on this kind of a level, on this kind of a trajectory within the three beings. They would be the lower capacity being who, in the Christian tradition, they have an aspiration, isn't it? They, in some sense, hold the future life to be more important than this life and work towards gaining that better future life. And so in terms of all of these, then we can rejoice in the wonderful teachings that pertain to those particular spiritual traditions, be it the Hindu traditions, the Jain traditions, the Christian traditions, the Islamic tradition, and so on. And that these all have wonderful teachings pertaining to those particular spiritual traditions. And we can also, in the context of the enlightened beings, also having the capacity to emanate infinitely in order to benefit sentient beings. It stands to reason that it's also very illogical to expect that there will be enlightened beings emanating in the different traditions, in the spiritual traditions, as Christian, as Muslim, as Jain, as Hindus, and so on as well, in order to benefit people at that level who have that particular disposition. So therefore, it's kind of like logical from our point of view to really appreciate and really rejoice in the different spiritual traditions, albeit that we don't necessarily have faith in those traditions because, of course, they have different objectives.
What is 他真在这个江州个多大的事业中的江州的马店我的讲。
So this verse then is referring, this verse number 7 is referring to the taking of refuge.
他这个他新的这个年数中间能这个那个这部特别松，这就说了个讲这个那那样这些哪里意思
？Verse number 8 then says, the subduer said, all the unbearable suffering of bad rebirths is the fruit of wrongdoing. And therefore, even at the cost of your life, never do wrong. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
对，是的，没事动，是的，这个你要说中间能这个了解这部特别松，这就说了个叫这个了，那样这件事哪里也是我的讲，我这讲的，他你说。要我一到就是他这个用这个的话，用这个的，他真的因为啥？这边那个这个，他就是真的给的，那个 accident 说的中呢，我 accident 中呢，你给的我嘛是靠真的给的，那讲说的就是那这个都巴扎下，你巴扎下的，你西个那个是来什么说的，所以到时候我当时就给住了，本来下完了，你要我参加了这个基本上呢。시간 하가들라다 아니 장목에 나와 차네 아니 장목에 나와 차네 그 중나서는 엔세바께 온죠 또 조부를 중나서는 작성께 온죠 아니 산열을 깨줘야지 장열을 깨온죠 아니 쇼부터 차에 나와 차네 나 장목이 죽으러 지나서도 나와 차온죠 전에 우가다 난제 장열을 깨줘야 되네 딱 가제 지금 어디 깨한다 가서다 중에는 사사 아니 딱 제법 민초자 차원도 아니 거기에 되게 지금 시간 나가서 실내세바스도 쇠탑 들어와 근데 지금 뉴바테는 개토에 준 거로 와 얘네지 얘네가 삼로 얘네가 세바 끼워서 그래서 말에 중요를 쌓아서 와 중요를 쌓 남자들도 바자 자사서 뒤용되고 와 뒤용되고 다 되지 뭐 인상 되네 이마다 동네 수인의 되고 말에 아니 세디 아니 소소게 지금 저바 칸 마가게 강에 된대체 수고면 또나 아니 예송의 동에서부터 쏟아 매버서 와 세들라 강에 충분지 미치가 책도자 라봤던 거 sö마도 봐 미치가 남주 약고 마대 맞서 뭐도 sö마도 봐 된대 나라도라 아니 가서다 랑 전제 숙청부 유에되게 되게 근데 인도 예송의 동에서 다른 것을 내매봐 인자 하고고 된대 내봐 있는 sö마도 와 줄다 sö마도 와 다 되네서 단단히 삼로다네 아니 가서 다가제 디과 맞아야 탑시 찍고 그래 뭐여 맞다 그래서 디과를 되는 용어 되고 요레스 로아카서 디벨 용어 되고 그래 아니 다 디과스는 남야 싸죠 말에 아니 말 싸사죠 망고요 디게 니부터 없이 거는 샥좀 제고래 매부 속으래 다다 고수 고마주 거네 제가 이나 고마 다들 실레 서버서 쇠답요 말에 쇠마다 있어 다른 남자들도 바자요래 디 샥딱 가요 다 고수 사는 실내서서 쇠딱 고수 사죠 때는 탑시시다 요 말에 어디대다 뒤에 받으면서 다 렌트 군에 켈는 거 요나 딜라 삼로 땅 숨어 요 봐. 딜라 삼로 땅 다들 삼로 땅에 가서 나야 맞지 디벨 내가 계속 맞다거든 아니 계속 나네 됐어
And so here, the unbearable suffering of bad rebirths is referring, of course, to the lower rebirths of the animal, the hungry spirit, and the hell realm rebirths, the three lower realms, and that this is comes from negative karma, negative karmas. And so it's pointing out on the one hand that these unfortunate rebirths don't happen by accident, that they are the result of causes that we have set down as imprints on our mind stream. And then at the point of death, they are stirred by craving, grasping, and existence into ripening into that kind of particular rebirth. And to say there are indicators, for example, at the point of death, if one has a kind of an attachment to who's feeling cold and has an attachment to wanting heat to avoid that cold. One is destined to end up in a hot hell realm, and then conversely, if one is hot, wants relief from that. For a cool one is destined for cold hell rebirth, and so on. But it's always the case that whatever hells will result from only from negative causes that we have laid down on our own mind stream. And this is what this verse is talking about. Therefore, even at the cost of your life, never do wrong, never engage in negativities. And that's here, we have to understand as well that this is a practice for this life. If we are in this life and we find ourselves so sensitive that even we find when somebody speaks ill of us, that we find that unbearable. Can't compare that to what kind of suffering is in store for us if we end up in the lower realms. And even as a hungry spirit or something like that, we can see that such suffering is unimaginable for us now. It's just out off the scale. Really. And so therefore, we should train ourselves in this life as a means of avoiding having to experience so much more harsh suffering in lower realms by avoid any kind of negative reactions or negative engagements in this life. And so this is important to do that now, and also to take stock of the fact that not only have we are engaging in fresh negativities in this life, but we have a massive store of negativities on our mind from countless previous lives. And so it behoves us to really practice purification, applying the four opponent powers in dealing with our negativities while they are still at the imprint stage on our minds. Because once they start ripening, then it's too late. We have missed the boat, as it were, and we have to then bear the consequences of whatever that karma was. So it really makes sense to try to purify as sufficiently, as sincerely as we possibly can, and so that we're dealing with the causal stage, the imprint stage of those negativities, and not leave it too late. Therefore, this verse is all about the acceptance of the law of cause and effect.
Kende shenda nyonjo lenda shela nyonjo sa leg niba chido mita mo shibju kende nyonjo sa le setla sana setla jebu nyonjo kende nyonjo an lenda shela nyonjo an kasa de bar tongjo nyonjo sana setla sana setla jebu nyonjo kende nyonjo sa setla le sana kewa jama tagara le nyonjo ta kasa de lenda shela nyonjo sana and said the last and lot that Kawa Mangu Chela Joya Tawada. Chicken Kawa Bumta Mongo yourself, not all because what Jebu Yonda the rig without some yonting. Penangara to Tata Milake less Sadi, Milake Kawa less Sadition, and the Celeste was said Tata, and me Pasilake, then I tango to be Kawa Lendera. That was a Mashipoto Yoye because vegetation tower. Tata me do that Mashibo Tosna Soyomare. Katra Celeste was set up and it came Sasa Sasarwa. Some Mashibo Yumbo Yoyomare. Katra for 10 days touching one. And they got the 10 days touching some Massa, Celeste was the set up Sarwa. Set up the Tata Taka give 10 days to them. Taka that guy attended the truth of your water, to the your watch, watch out. Some Mashibo that people are my your touch. 이나 야 개와 제마는 요에 때다는 실리스버서 쇠답교 쇠답교 임바 인상 아니 개와 걔네 근데 임바 인나 아니 디 아니 이부터 피곤해 샵점 전에 디 마요 와서 두고 요래
So too that there are different powers, different levels of the powers of different karmas. And so, for example, now here, in a sense here, we have taken a human rebirth. So we've had to have the karma to be able to lead to that human rebirth. And that may have been accumulated, countless lifetimes ago. It may have been accumulated several lifetimes ago, or just in the immediate preceding life. And that, nevertheless, we have this life. Now, then within this life, we also can experience the results of karmas, depending on the impact of the karmas on our mind stream. So in other words, like karmas that have made a very big impact as an imprint on our mind stream, and we have accumulated them in this life, may also ripen in this life. Then, depending on the power of karma as well, we may generate the cause on our mind stream as an imprint in this life, and it may ripen in the immediately subsequent life, the next life. And then, depending on the power of karmas that we have accumulated in this life, they may ripen in any life after that, after the immediately next life. In other words, it could be hundreds of thousands of lives into the future that a particular karma will ripen. And so that karma has like many different aspects to it. It's a very complex theory to understand. And so in the context of this particular life, we had laid down the imprints to be reborn as a human being in this life. And then at the point of death, the craving, grasping, and existence links were awakened, as it were, into ripening, ripening a particular cause that led us into a human intermediate state, and then ultimately into our death. Is something that, of course, will definitely happen. But it's like we have to understand that the death that is inevitable for us is already built into our birth that we have just taken. That is a certainty. And so here, what we are working towards is towards creating causes that will have an influence on our future lives. This is the kind of the focus and the emphasis for us. And that in this sense, this is kind of what the impetus for our practice is, that we are enthusiastic about creating positive, virtuous causes that will enhance the prospects for us in future lives and our capacity to benefit others, of course, and dealing with all of the negativities that we've hauled into this life with us, and that we need to therefore purify assiduously using the four opponent powers, etc., in order to deal with that side of our imprints as well.
그래서 배는 자자마다 내 옆에 싸우도 코로나 그때 남인 그 대본 연구래 아니 영화 교토 연구래 단제 연구요래 배는 자자마이나 남인 그 대보다 배는 속쪽으로서 남인 그 대보라 아니 저기 냐솔을 게 연구요래 아니 가서 다 가자 제바 교토 다 아니 영화 교토 제바 교토라 속쪽을 아니 미개월래 바이다 속쪽을 가보들 연구요래 아니 저 영화 교토라 아니 내 나다 먹고 새 통도 잡으들 연구요래 아니 단제라 아니 저 코유가 전에야 따다 내가 강에 채디가 먹고 좋은 되게 요래 어다가 저 가서래 저 레팅 사바이네 제부 민다 먹고 싶은 거다 그래서 먼저 내가 저 신도를 제부 따바는 제도 신도 사변지 따바이나 가시 로마 차줘야 가시 야가 차자 가시 따와 차줘야 따고 저 이거 민다 먹고 싶은 것도 와 먹고 싶은 것도 와 왔다 제보 총조지마다 매다 사변의 총조지마다 여마다 거의 용다 먹고 싶은 것도 다 진당 시전에 내 여바 싸운데 아니 딜라데네 제보 나 소바 좀 되게 또 로다 지금 동도에서는 남이 그 제보서다 용화 교정서 제보 교정서 단제스 것도 먹고 싶은 용 되게 또 용 되게 또 아니 딜라데네야 니바 라르 먹고 싸게 좀 먹고 요것도 다 진짜 이거 인도 아니 거기 당분에 지금 이거 하고 봤잖아요. 아니 제시에 때문에 아니 지금 당분 마요에 탑시대 그래도 용화에는 용화에 타대 그 탑내가 이제 님부터 없이 그래 샷금 지었다 지금 탑시도 맞잖아. 아니 가서도 레미 제바도 밑에와 제바 취미 싸워인다. 아니 니아바도 제부 용거 요도 아니 삼사제 개처벌 도와.
And so, yeah, to understand as well that, the negatives on our mind stream, negativities on our mind stream, those causes on our mind stream have built in this potential for very much greater ripening results. And that this is something that we must always bear in mind, that and lead to great conscientiousness and carefulness on our part in what we are doing with our body, speech, and mind. For example, if we have a cause for having killed that negative cause on our mind stream, that not only can result in rebirth in a lower realm as a ripening result, but it may also, even in this life, if we're reborn as a human again, lead to the cause that is connected to a result, meaning that we, as somebody who has killed before, have now got this habit of killing again, and this will come to the fore in a future life, somebody who likes to kill. Also, it can have another effect that because of the habit of killing in the past, one is suffering in this life from disease, sickness, who gets constantly ill. He never experiences decent health. This can be the result of killing in the past as well. So there is, and also there's the environmental result where one might find oneself, even if not in a lower realm, of course, but even in a human realm, where it's a very frightening sort of environment that one is in, where one's life is constantly in danger. And we have a great picture of this around the world now as well. So it's kind of pointing out that one small cause can lead to a whole plethora of vast results. And so this is something important. It's often compared to, the tiny seed that's planted in the ground that can give rise to a huge tree, with lots of different fruit on it. And so that's a very, very tiny cause, but a massive result is what we should be looking at. Therefore, that we need to care for the kind of causes that we're laying down now, that we see that they are, in terms of any negativity, minimized, if not only stopped altogether, but in terms of positive causes, that they are magnified as much as possible. And that in terms of the causes that are already on our mind stream, again, to engage in the purification practice involving the four opponent powers, etc. That this is a very, very important, because we accept those principles of karma, that we do not experience the result of a karma that we have not created ourselves. And the karma that has been created, a cause that is there, does not disappear of its own accord, but will ripen eventually. So we know that to be true, and therefore we should really adjust our behavior accordingly.
나면 이제 개설라리에서 왔다가 지금 소소 내당고 이봐 인자 아니 지금 내녀바다 싸주는 되어서는 소소 대바의 시행게 소소 소소 잡아 시체 거되는 잘하지는 아니 되게 레니 뭐 마사베 털어 배조지야다 나사바데 냐부 도시고는 샹동제 개체 버렸어 얘야 아니 다가 개세 라레를 쪼거든 심제 탐제도 산제 고마토베 쳐도 심제 탐제도 산제 고마토고는 소소 녀소를 깨되는 간 제도 말와 다들 인사 오다 심제 탐제도 산제 고마토베 쳐도 아니 녀소 교대가 대마게 탑지지 너무 와다 마게 탑지지 어떻게 쳐 야.
And so therefore, finding out here as a beginner in this verse that we should avoid negativity, any kind of negative karma, the best that we possibly can, and that this involves, of course, the cultivation of mindfulness and alertness to ensure that we are always making the right choices and avoid making the wrong choices. And as well as that, we supplement that with purifying negativities on our own mind stream using the core opponent powers of the previously collected negative karma, and also making sure that we have always the right motivation for engaging in both positive and purifying the negative. And that means to attain the state of liberation and enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings, and to keep that to the forefront, and to say that, in this context, I want to avoid any rebirth in the lower realms in order that I can better be able to benefit sentient beings. It's important also to keep that purity of motivation.
얘네 미스터한테서 맞지로 장 먼저 장주 선배게 아니 지금 가서도 지금 준주기 전 다가자지 님도 겠네 아니 샘제 뒤로 배받되네 아니 깨바네 깨배받도 아니 녀fol라 내기 냐월라 내고네 내기 쓰게 돌았다 냐월라 깨바지면서 어디 뒷내도 뱉로 가네 저 랑이 겨와디 될라 모아데 대다가 중에 랑질되네 아니 깨기 쓰죠 깨 다디 장관선에 깨 말에 다 장주 선배 님도 엉겨 그래서 녀fol라 깨도 미케벨레 때니 끼고 열마도 다디 개벨레 삼지 미자바디 개벨레 삼지 미자바지도 딱 가자 녀석을 깨잖아 고네 고도 배워 녀석 주도가 맞다 녀석 가서 디파이들에 미케벨레잖아 셀 내봐잖아 녀석 다 셀 따봐 주어도 녀석을 가밖에 또 그래 이나야 인도 계속 다니지 보고 인도 다 공부해도 줘야 될라 배 가서라 계속 내보지 아직 걔네 저렇게 깨는 말이야 마버지 깨봐 있네 켈레 깨봐 있네 답에 깨기 여봐 있네 깨기 인사잖아 어떻게 지도 인도 배고 열어 아니 질라 때는 다 람권에 것도 배고 열어 다들 가서 거치 사이콜로지가 도다지기 삼르고 딩기 도다지기 거 도다지기 전에 다고 뭐 이거 내 저때 거 디기 줄어 차고 동에 줄 차고 뭐
So just in case there is no misunderstanding, of course, we've all heard, this great pledge by the bodhisattvas that even if it were to benefit just one sentient being, I would be willing to abide for eons in the hell realms. And that, so this kind of sounds contradictory to what we've just said. But of course, this is all about the great courage of the bodhisattva aspiration, and that here it's sort of like how do you say, counterintuitive is the word, or kind of reverse psychology, in the sense that of course, to be reborn in the hell realms, one is talking about engaging in negative actions to lead to that result. But in this pledge by the bodhisattva, of course, there is no negativity involved. Therefore, it would be impossible for them to actually end up in the hell realms anyway. And so it's all about saying, but if it would have benefit one sentient being, I definitely would accept the suffering of the hell realms, undoubtedly. And so it's all about the generation of the great positive quality of this courage to be able to take on anything if it would be of benefit, just to even want a sentient being. And so this is what must be distinguished here. And again, it's kind of like it's a cause. The cause that the bodhisattva is talking about and generating here is a cause for happiness from life to life to increase, but it's not certainly a cause for suffering, is it?
그때 제가 이네 동해 요 말이 가서나 내 제부 요 말와 디베 제부면은 동해 가와요 아니 가서 대배 제가 이바 인자 아니 섬라 디기요 그때 제가 이네
So again, I'm saying, even if it was possible for that bodhisattva to be born in the hell realm, there would be no suffering. And why? Because they haven't created the cause for suffering. And in fact, there would be a happiness for them, even in that context, even if it was possible for them to be reborn in such a state.
다 가자 다디 가서 내거라 렉녀마 사게 도사 이마자 레상고 사게 되다 그때 레상고 사게 될려봐 있네 아니 내 요한테도 그거 내 요한테도 그래 그거들 다 가자 되게 샤잖아 맞아
So it's a case of saying that with being again the law of cause and effect, that the negative karma leads to that kind of a negative result. But if one is not creating negative karma, then that result is beyond, even if one should desire it. And so let's leave it at that.
Yeah, what did it? I got another doing the Genesis and the setup or set up the Suva. What did the Chandaka judge? What did the Chandaka judge? Because of the attack, the day is similar to Sanja Kuma to be said that the cover section. And Maniba Tagaranga, Loshani, and it's the day Lotini. And it's a to the attack, you make him watch the Juso subject. And then I just simply come to Sanja Kuma, when you talk about the subject, some stuff. So that Lamacheres command to Meta, and simply took to a so what in the summer time, what in the same kidney, and the same give a lot in it, narrating what you do, something with the commercial.
So let's bring our mind to the figure of Chen Rejig on our crown and then prepare the lotus sun and moon disk mandala seat at our own heart center. And we begin with the lotus by kind of reflecting on the mind of renunciation, really centering on that sense of the mind of definite emergence from psychic existence, and out of that establishes the lotus mandala seat. And then reflecting on the one I who wants to attain liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment, searching for this I, going through the meditation, looking for that I, not finding it, and that mere absence of the object of negation then produces this the sun disk mandala of the wisdom element, and then this I, the not finding of this I, explicitly pointing out the lack of any objective or independent existence, and therefore implicitly showing us that all phenomena arise in dependence, and therefore I can create the causes to attain the state of enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings, and therefore generate that mind of bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, which establishes the moon disk mandala seat.
What a pandit Lama watches, then the target Niga Pemetenjo, Kadisham, Kuzu to the Telesunde, said the Tanguka, Tasum Chen, Tambuka, and March. And you welcome to show Sumaka Tension, Sadia, Command Mata, Padota, and the Rani Pamata Jigger, and the Tem to show some such.
Then the invocation verse of glorious and precious Guru, come take a lotus and moon seat, place there at my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. And at the beginning, at the end of the first recitation, the figure moves starts the journey down through our central channel from the crown. And at the end of the second recitation of that verse, arrives at our prepared seat at our heart center. And at the end of the third recitation, we have the certainty that the Guru Chenrezig will remain with us until we attain the state of enlightenment itself. And that brings a tremendous sense of joy to the mind.
What is it? What anything needed not be needed on the in the spot nature, and they got the logic of Sangama, Chekachi, my industry, and that's good. 담도 잡는 시 인데스만 내지가 자 아니 데이터들라 아니 지금 제네스가 생각 오마니 빼면 좀 거다 되네 아니 자매는 생각 엄다리 두다리 둘서 엄다리 소 되네 텐데가 오면 예타마 해도 타고 타다 가자 하고 마샤만이 소 되는 가지고 코로 숨잖아 코 보다 이 니가 비틀라 아니 라마 제레스 내때 맞지 안 될래 왜세 트는 템조다 안마 랑게 takatuda mat mela ma trene ta kanti ka padu reset chidu padu kanti to na kanti padu reset wal tena ta rangi ta yala da nila la so ma te ta kan reset ta rangi lu ko ne ta so jo ma je ba le ma mi ta wa jo wa set te tsenga ma ko ma no ta wa ane te ne nga ko ne nak se to nga ko ne tu ta ma tu nga je la so ma ani ye ko nak se no se lo ta la to ta te ti la sa ma kharina nga ma ti nga ma Oma never started to go. But Kasurata never chose something. Kanga never chose something. Never chose something, but Kasurata can never chose something. Chose something. And Chang Tabachu, Yabashi, there's a mother, and it's you to find the Komatavik, and no more time, but she did what I'm there. Long tea, you and have the done. 아니 가나다자 다바람 좀 많이 찾으래. 어디에 누가 쳐봐지 찾고 있었어. 어디에 찾고 있었어. 어디에 고마셔.
And so then the petals of the lotus fold over the figure of Chenrezig as our heart is sealed at the tips by a 5-pronged white vajra. Then that package, as it were, is encircled by the mantra of compassion or Mani Padme Hum in a clockwise direction, the mantra of Tara, Om Tari Tutari Turi Soha in an anti-clockwise direction, and the mantra of dependent origination in a clockwise direction. And then from within, light rays emanate, permeating through the lotus leaves, petals, and then permeating through my entire body, from the crown of my head down through the soles of my feet, entering into all of my limbs and the fingers, so that my entire body is filled with a purifying light, which deals with all of the negativities and obscurations that I have accumulated since the beginning of time, all the negativities of the physically accumulated negativities of any killing or stealing, or sexual misconduct, or the verbal negativities of lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle gossip, and the mental negativities of covetousness, malicious intent, and malicious view, so that they are all dealt with completely. They are purified along with their imprints as well, and completely eradicated. And then also that I've been down to the blessing light of quickly establishing all of the qualities to attain the state of enlightenment, so that I overcome all the deluded obscurations and the obscurations through omissions, and that I quickly can attain that state of enlightenment into the pure realms of enlightenment.
아니 라마체레스가 꾸들 해지 제견잖아 아니 소소리드 라마체레스 꿀을 줘서 소소 신도 차에 셈데 년년잖아 라마체레스 투들 해지 제견잖아 아니 소소 셈데 라마체레스 아니 꿀을 줘서 랑게 룽아 예수다 라마체레스 구종도 이거 뭐이네 줘서 네디야 아니 제게 라마체레스가 안다 네 기타니 라마체레스가 시작하는 줘서 되게 대화제 대화도 무슨 쉽게 소소도 고마셔
And then through the combination of my own most subtle wind acting as the substantial cause, with the body of Chenrezig acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed into the enlightened body of a Buddha. And then through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, with the mind of Chenrezig acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is now transformed into the enlightened mind of a Buddha. And I become completely enlightened, indivisible from the body, speech, and mind of the enlightened being of Chenrezig. and that this place that I am in is transformed into the enlightened realm of an enlightened being, and I experience a bliss which combines with voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
다 라체레스 아니 고손토도 뭐 예매 주어대 투갈 아니 심제가 자더냐 뭐 외세 초알라 되나 다 가서다 다 가자지 감속에 심제 탐자로 포함되네 아니 감속에 심제 되다 던자 계지가 남아 제레스 꿀주도 대다게 내 대다 던자가 내기 껴 탐자 다네 아니 제레스가 셰칼로 주도 선다체 셰칼로 주도 선다 원대체 아니 라체레스도 감도 심제 다 제레스가 아니 고손 뭐 예매 차왔다 대체도 나기 개와 가리 두바다 아니 두개 소소도 제가 유대나 마도 똑같이 파다던데 이 대화체 대화도 뭐 저던지서 이식도 수도 고바시
And then seeing myself as the fully enlightened Chen Rezi, and indivisible from the body, speech, and mind from enlightened being Chen Rezi, and send out light rays of my heart center, equal in number to all the sentient beings in all the three realms of existence, and on touching them, they in one moment completely arise as fully enlightened beings, and that they also their place also is transformed into the palatial enlightened abode of Chen Rezi, and that they experience all of the bliss of the enlightened state. And also then I contemplate both the virtue created to attain this state, this fulfillment of this goal, the goal itself, all the beings involved, the state of Chen Rezi, all of which are completely lacking any objective existence and are merely imputed by thought. And so enter into this realization of emptiness from which arises bliss, and then the combined with voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
다 얘기 다 심제 탐제가도 아니베 그 심제가 탐제가 더 타지 봐 심제 탐제 산제 고맙고 그다 니마 되고 그 도수 손에 가고
And I rejoice in being able to fulfill the main objective I have of leading all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment. This is wonderful.
다 단다다 뭐가 이제 삼래 얘네야 이 사변체네 이 사변체네 아니 뉴도 되게 요에게 아니 다 줄이 좋아서
And of course, I know that I'm operating here at the level of my own imagination, but I make a powerful dedication that this seed will become truly manifest in reality as quickly as possible.
다 되는지 용화라 라체레스 코마토브라 라체레스 코마토발라 아니 소소게 다 가자지 년중게 자주가 셈게 양다베 따와게나 다 가자 되는 안비사주 람날 저바치고도 아 되는지 용화라 다 가자 가서는 돈이 닌지 닌고저 람귤라 마지마 탐번도 다 되는 이마이사 다 소소게 지금 야구 중내다 독자 중내다 다 내가 잡아 있는데 심어 있는데 가야 잡으면서 다 지금 그가 돈이 닌지 닌고저 람귤라 기에 줄이 좋아쇼 이 게임은 좋아쇼 좋아 그래서 지금 통장에 통 야구 마중아 이마 있나요 이 돈이 닌지 닌고저 그 게게 아니 줄을 좋아쇼 통 야구 좋아이나 줄을 좋아 내가 라바 내가 쇼 가야 잡으면서 이게 그가 돈이 닌지 닌고저 게게 게임은 좋아쇼 좋아 게임은 좋아쇼 what does that is our do 이면은 탐면도 이면은 탐면도 what are the any care like you are sure what the watch
And we make our dedication that to bring this about. Of course, I must generate the perfect mind of renunciation of the mind of enlightenment itself and of the correct view of emptiness, and that therefore immediately try to transform my whole attitude of mind on a constant basis, and seeing it as being this is indispensable. There is no other way. I have no choice about it. If I really have these aspirations, I really need to see to it that I am dealing with everything good that arises, everything bad that arises, and everything in between. All sickness, even to the point of death, I'm able to automatically transform it into a conducive condition for my spiritual practice. And that here, if I'm engaged in business, the business is going great, business is bust, I'm gaining a good job, or I've just lost my job. It's all should matter less. That in fact, all of what happens is simply prompting me to engage in spiritual practice, seeing as a conducive condition, as an inspiration to engage in this spiritual practice. And I must see it as, look, there's no other way. That this is the only kind of reasonable attitude I can maintain and I can cultivate if my goal is to attain the omniscient state of enlightenment to benefit sentient beings.
Oh, that the samotana jotuba ina, and so that music meaningful travel, meaningful that dilation meaningful yomare, what is it?
And so if we can transform our thinking in this way, then well, that's called a meaningful life. And in fact, if we can't, if we kind of don't make any effort, then there's no way we can actually talk about a meaningful life.
What the Gawande
Lama You are of electric
Strive for
power,
great
great
treasure and
treasure,
compassion,
compassion, not
not
in
in
the
true
true
existence.
and man, justly
Magician, master
master
of
of
flawless
flawless
wisdom, as
wisdom,
well as
as well as
destroyer of
Vajrapani,
hordes of
destroyer of
demons
hordes of
without
demons
exception.
without exception.
Sun
Sun
Kappa,
Kappa,
crown
crown
jewel, the
jewel of the
savior, land
saviors
of
of
the
the land of
snows.
snow.
Sun Kappa, at your feet I make
I make
requests.
requests.